So, like the last video, I don't really know how to start this one, especially since this is probably gonna be a lot more heavier. Since, well, last week, or at least last week from where I'm recording, we've lost two very prominent figures in the wrestling business, and that is Terry Funk and Windham Rotunda, also known as Bray Wyatt. Now, I might as well just start with Terry Funk, because he was the one that passed away first. And I'll admit, Terry Funk, when I first knew about him, was kind of already in legend status. He's been a wrestler for a very long time, over 4 decades, which is very impressive, I should say. And how I first discovered him, ironically enough, was either because of a very obscure wrestling game for the PS2 called Legends of Wrestling, which I feel like I might do a video about one of these days, or it's because of my VHS tapes featuring Terry Funk during the WWE, or as it was called, WWF, when he was with Cactus Jack, right? Mick Foley, one of his greatest rivals and partners, when they were going against the New Age Outlaws at WrestleMania 14. But yeah, Terry Funk had a lot of legendary rivalries with Ric Flair, Dusty Rhodes, Sabu, and like I already mentioned, Mick Foley, which I think is probably one of his most memorable ones in my opinion. And it can't really be understated that what Cody Rhodes said, like back in SmackDown during the tribute show, was true. He is indeed a cowboy. He pretty much lived for wrestling, he would die for wrestling, and he was very passionate and dedicated to the craft of wrestling. And I am also glad that he had a very long and luxurious career in many different promotions like the NWA, WCW, ECW, and the WWE. He had a 4-decade-long career. He lived for an admittedly long time for a hardcore wrestler. Like, seriously, this guy was in barbed wire death matches. He was just insane. And I'm just surprised that he could even walk in the age of 70. So, yeah, I am glad that he could look at the fruits of his labors and essentially have this 4-decade-long career. But sadly, I can't really say the same about the next wrestler I'm about to talk about, and that is Windham Rotunda, also known as Bray Wyatt. This announcement hurts me a lot, and it mostly has to do with the fact that he died in a very young age of 36 because of a heart attack. And I'll admit, I actually did plan on making a video about this literally like a day or two after the announcement, kind of get my overall thoughts, and it kind of ended up becoming very emotionally charged and very angry by the end, and I'll admit, I didn't really want to, upload that and just kind of start over in a clean slate, because I feel like I don't really want that to be my, impressions of this whole thing, and I kind of want to sit on it for a whole week, kind of let it process, and now that it's been a week ever since the announcement, I'll admit, I still find it very surreal. I still don't believe that it happened, And I think that mostly has to do with the fact that with Bray Wyatt, I pretty much watched his whole career from beginning to end. From his run as Husky Harris, which I'll admit I haven't really remembered much of. However, he was a part of the Nexus stable, which is a whole can of worms onto itself. And it's not like this part of his history is completely forgotten because, well, I'll get to that a little later. But once he became the Bray Wyatt character, the Eater of Worlds, right? Alongside with his Wyatt family, featuring Eric Rowan and Luke Harper, who is also known as Brody Lee in AEW, who we also unfortunately lost not too long ago, so may he also rest in peace. And later on, introduced Braun Strowman, who is the black sheep of the Wyatt family. This is probably the run that most wrestling fans my age remember him the most for. And I do too, with his admittedly really chilling but awesome entrance from his feuds with Daniel Bryan, Randy Orton, and yes, even John Cena, who I'll admit, I was pretty upset when John Cena beaten him in WrestleMania, but I feel like it did all paid off later on, but I'll get to that a little bit later. And there is also his feud, or I should say a faction feud, with the Wyatt family versus the Shield, which I also think is probably one of the most coolest faction wars I have seen at the time. The Shield being Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins, and Dean Ambrose, or as most wrestling fans may know him now as Jon Moxley in AEW. And I cannot also forget to mention his rivalry with Matt Hardy when he was the broken gimmick, or as they called it in WWE, the woken gimmick. But after the Eater of Worlds Bray Wyatt gimmick, essentially I guess you could say ran its course, Bray Wyatt then reinvented himself as the Firefly Funhouse host, which was like this Mr. Rogers and Blue's Clues deal. And in these segments, Bray Wyatt also talks to these little puppets that sort of, I guess, represent a part of Bray Wyatt's past. For example, there is Ramblin' Rabbit, Mercy the Buzzard, Abby the Witch, and Huskus the Pig Boy, who I'm sure his name might slightly sound a bit familiar from earlier on this video. But in spite of all that, what makes the Firefly Funhouse so intriguing is that it always seemed like it had this sinister and darker aura behind it all. This is where we introduce probably one of my favorite wrestling characters slash gimmicks of all time. Sure, we could talk about the missed potential and the questionable booking decisions that The Fiend has gone through, but I honestly don't care, because The Fiend, I think, is probably one of the most intimidating, one of the most badass looking wrestlers I have ever seen in recent memory. He was like a cross between Jason Voorhees, Michael Myers, and Sweet Tooth from Twisted Metal. It was just amazing, especially as someone that really likes horror. This really spoke to me in a way. And The Fiend also gave us a lot of amazing and memorable moments, like his amazing debut, where he fought Finn Balor in what you could probably call a glorified squash match, but it was a squash match that mattered. It showed how much of a threat, how much of an imposing monster he was as The Fiend. And there was also his strap match with Daniel Bryan, which, okay, I'm just gonna say it right here. Any match with Bray Wyatt and Daniel Bryan is always certified gold. They always put out some of the most must-watch wrestling I have seen in the 2010s. But I also have to mention, in my opinion, my personal favorite Bray Wyatt, well, I guess you could call it a cinematic match, but nonetheless, it is one of my favorite moments of Bray Wyatt, and that is his WrestleMania match against John Cena in a Firefly Funhouse match. Now, this is a very polarizing match, but I'm more in the camp of people who love it. I think this is a brilliant showcase of both Bray Wyatt and John Cena's inner psyche and show of character, and I think that's absolutely amazing and brilliant. I mean, sure, people probably would have preferred like a traditional match, and that would be cool and all, but again, I think this really shows the creativity of Bray Wyatt and how he could incorporate all these elements into his character and in this one match. Now, remember when I said that I wasn't a fan of John Cena defeating Bray Wyatt years previously in another WrestleMania? Well, I think it's all made up just because of this Firefly Funhouse match, which incorporated that loss into this match's story. I just think it's absolutely brilliant, and honestly gave me a new perspective of their whole rivalry that spanned for years. I honestly cannot do this match justice. I highly recommend checking it out if you're interested. But after WrestleMania 37, after The Fiend's match against Randy Orton, he pretty much got released for whatever reason. I mean, I kind of knew what the quote-unquote reasons were, but I won't get into that. And I feel like if it wasn't for the sexual misconduct case that Vince was in last year, I think this would have been the very last time we would have ever seen of Bray Wyatt in the WWE. Now granted, who knows if he would have been signed by AEW, but though miraculously, when Triple H was underpowered the WWE for that very short period of time in 2022, he ended up re-signing a lot of the wrestlers that Vince McMahon let go. That includes Bray Wyatt. However, before I even cover the return of Bray Wyatt, I do want to mention this very creative campaign that they did before his return. The White Rabbit. Yes, the little teases that they sprinkled in before his return, where they played Jefferson Airplanes as White Rabbits in, like, ad breaks in Raw and SmackDown, and they would have included these QR codes in episodes of Raw and SmackDown, which would have led you to these ARG games that would have hinted on Bray Wyatt's return. I'll admit, I was all over that stuff at the time. I remembered I got addicted to the song, and I gotta thank him for even introducing me to that song in the first place. It is a banger. And I think it's probably one of the most creative... Actually, I have no idea what to really call it, but it was something new and different and creative, and it's something I never really seen before in wrestling. But with all this being said, at the night of Extreme Rules in 2022, we finally get to see the return of Bray Wyatt. And man oh man, it was an amazing return. The build-up, the hype, the crowd reaction. It was all just amazing. And the SmackDown after Extreme Rules, when we finally get to hear the man himself, Bray Wyatt, I'll admit, I think this is where he said his most emotional, his most rawest, his most real promo that he ever spoken in his whole career. And I'll admit, when I first saw that promo, I kinda got a little misty-eyed, like at the time, and I feel like if I rewatched the promo, it might kinda make me even more emotional than I was before, especially since what he said in that promo was apparently the truth. It was essentially reality that he was talking about. And I can't help but feel for the man. Especially after, like, at that time, losing his grandpa, I think it was his grandpa, and Brody Lee. You know, Luke Harper, as I mentioned already, who unfortunately passed away not too long ago. Like, that's gotta hurt. And like I said before, may he also rest in peace, but this is honestly one of the best promos I have ever heard from any wrestler, really. Really emotional, really gripping, it's really emotional looking back at it now.
I can sit here right now today and I can look all of you in the eyes and I can say that you were there when I was weak, when I was vulnerable, when I was down. So I just wanted to say thank you. You all saved my life.
And I also have to mention the entrance music that he had at the time, Shattered by Code Orange. My personal favorite Bray Wyatt entrance song. I think that it is the perfect culmination of Windham Rotunda / Bray Wyatt's development throughout the years. And I think it's just a beautiful piece of music in general. And it's honestly a lot more emotional now, thinking about the lyrics. Now yes, we could all have our opinions about Bray Wyatt's most recent run, but I'll admit, despite all of that, I was honestly just happy that he was around. I just think that WWE was just kind of missing something without Bray Wyatt at the time. And even though you could argue that his run could have been better and there was a lot of missed opportunity, he still really kept me entertained with his excellent promo and character work, and I do feel like he did really help elevate LA Knight's career from where he is right now. And even though I'll admit I wasn't really that excited for his feud against Bobby Lashley or Brock Lesnar at this year's WrestleMania, I still felt like there was so much potential moving forward. He could have had a feud with Karrion Kross, since God knows he needs a push. And hell, I think him feuding with the Judgment Day just writes itself. I think they could work perfectly together. And this could even build up to this dream match that I had. The Fiend versus the Demon. But sadly, all of that is just fantasy booking and just fiction at this point, because sadly, here comes the hard part. For months, we haven't really heard from Bray Wyatt, and his WrestleMania match with Bobby Lashley was cancelled. And I remembered hearing many rumors that, oh, he had like an illness, and that, or he had like creative differences, and and you know, all that stuff. But months later, we finally got some news regarding Bray Wyatt that he had indeed a life-threatening illness. Now, the illness that we were told was very non-specific, but we were at least given news that he was recovering and was potentially ready for an in-ring return. And I remember hearing like speculations of a return whenever that would happen, but sadly, weeks later, we were given a rude awakening as we were given the announcement that Bray Wyatt, or as he's called in real life, Windham Rotunda, passed away. And I remember when I first heard about this announcement, I was just kind of minding my own business, just looking up some Terry Funk tributes. All of a sudden, I saw this, I saw a title in my recommended videos side, saying that Bray Wyatt passed away, and my eyes lit up when I saw that. I was like, what the? This has to be like a cruel joke. This has to be like some fake news kind of stuff, but sadly, it was true. It was real. It wasn't make-believe. He actually did pass away, and even saying that, I can't even process that. And I can't imagine how his friends, his family, and other wrestlers feel about this announcement. Wrestlers like Eric Rowan, who not just lost Brody Lee, but also Bray Wyatt, how Braun Strowman feels about this, Alexa Bliss, who was a part of Bray Wyatt's mythos, and just many, many other wrestlers who worked with him, and even his family, his wife, his 4 children, his father, Mike Rotunda, who a lot of wrestling fans know him as IRS. They probably have it the worst, since, this is his family. And, my condolences to all of them. It must be really hard to deal with a death at such a young age. But in spite of all that, I'm honestly glad that a lot of people did pay their respects to this legend, right? I am glad that SmackDown and Raw did their own Bray Wyatt tribute shows, and hell, even in All In London, we saw the House of Black do their small tribute to Bray Wyatt, which I think was absolutely beautiful. I just hope that everyone that was close to him are doing fine. And I guarantee you, Bray Wyatt's legacy will never be forgotten. And I do hope that he does get inducted into the Hall of Fame next year, which also would probably hurt because we will never have the opportunity to hear his amazing Hall of Fame speech. But, it is what it is, right? I just really miss the guy because he was a wrestler that I've always been really excited to see, and just he's always been very fascinating to me. I always loved his crazy gimmicks and characters and ideas. I think they've always been so interesting to me, so compelling. He've always compelled me. And I remember when he returned, that was like the most excited I have ever been in wrestling at the time. And it just hurts that we won't be seeing him again. At least in this lifetime. But regardless, I do want to end this in a positive note as remembrance of both Terry Funk and Bray Wyatt. May they both rest in peace, and may they both always be remembered in wrestling legend. They will never be forgotten, I guarantee you that. That's all I really gotta say. Thank you.